Santo Domingo, a game that I picked up at Django in 2017. I saw it played, it seemed interesting. It seemed like a minimalistic bonsai version of Puerto Rico with more bluffing and more reading the opponent. And after playing the game, I can tell you that, well, my intuition was correct. I believe that that is an accurate description of the game. The game, it's an interesting mix between incredibly accessible general mechanics and detail. That is, the core rules are incredibly simple, but then there is a bunch of special effects that you had to know to be able to play the game competently. The game comes with this board here that has a track that records number of victory points available for grabs. Then we have a track for goods that also are available for the players. So there is a track that describes the rate of exchange between goods and victory points. There are certain actions that will allow you to trade goods for victory points. And here, for example, if the marker is there, then by reducing the number of goods that I have by 2, I gain a victory point, and I can do that multiple times for multiple goods. Each player has 2 cards, one to keep track of the goods. You can have up to 15, and then you have a victory point card where you record your victory points. The first player to get to 30 victory points wins the game. In the expert game, 45, and actually that's the version that I like, to 45 victory points. The architecture of the game is just a little more interesting. But how do you acquire goods and victory points and stuff like that? By playing these cards. Each player has a hand of 8 cards that are all the hands are exactly the same. Each turn, each player chooses 1 or 2 cards depending on the number of players. With 2 and 3 players is 2 cards per turn. With 4 to 6 players is 1 card per turn. Then once everybody has committed their cards, players flip their cards face up, flip their selection face up, and then the cards are resolved. They're resolved in numerical order from the lowest number to the highest. Cards with the same number resolve simultaneously, and that is the core idea. This is the core idea of the game. After all cards have been resolved, they're discarded. You advance these markers here by a number of spaces that depends on the number of players. So, for example, with 3 players, by 5 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which is how you replenish these values here, which will be depleted by the actions of the players. So you add some things there, and that's it. Do you get your cards back? Do you get to draw cards? Not necessarily. Your cards stay in the discard pile until you perform a certain action that lets you get them back. And this is the core idea. But of course, the personality of the game comes from what the cards allow you to do. And the icons here do a good job of reminding you of what the cards do. Bear with me, it may feel extremely abstract, it may feel like a list, maybe a confusing list of actions, but if you play the game after a hand or two, everything will come together nicely. Now, the captain is the first card that resolves and allows you to take up to 2 victory points from the supply on the board. Some victory points come from heaven, from unspecified sources. Some victory points come directly from here if they are available. So the captain can take up to 2 victory points. Suppose that I play the captain, I was the only one. Then I reduce that value by 2 victory points and I grab 2 victory points. As simple as that. The admiral can give me up to 5 victory points, and that's great, but resolves after the captain. So in this case, for example, if someone had played the captain, the admiral after the captain, that person would only be able to get 1 because that is all that is left. So up to 5 victory points, but if those are available. And so maybe there are a lot of points available there. You will be tempted to play the admiral, but of course, a lot of other players might. And again, if multiple players have played the same card, these resolve simultaneously, and also the loot is divided. So, for example, here we have 93 players had played the admiral. Then each player gets 3 points. The governor pretty much, I guess, exploits his political influence on the army to get goods. For for each admiral, for each captain that was played this turn, the governor gives you 4 goods that you record here on your card. Again, they come from heaven; they don't come from that track there. For each admiral that was played, you get 2 goods. So, pretty interesting combination. If I see that there are a lot of points there, I think my fellow players are gonna play admirals and captains. That's probably is the right time to play this card. Will generate a ton of goods. I don't get victory points there, but by the way, if they are splitting those victory points, it may not be good. If I'm playing my governor, I may get a lot of goods, exploiting what they did. Now, as you can see, there's a certain logic to these 3 cards. So here's the same idea, but with goods. You have a card that gives you some goods if you play it, a card that gives you more goods but comes after, so it gives you more goods only if the frigates have not depleted, and then you have a card that will give you advantages based on how many frigates and galleons have been played, but this time it generates victory points. You see the logic here. These are cards that generate victory points, and there is one that exploits victory points to give you goods. Here you have cards that give you goods, and you have one that exploits those cards to generate victory points. If you play the frigates, you get up to 3 points, again from the limited supply on the board. If you get the galleon, you get infinite. You get as many as they are available, which may be 0, which may be very low, especially if you have to split. And the captain will give you 3 goods for each frigate that was played this turn, and will give you 1 good for each galleon that was played this turn. So I've been collecting goods for a while. What am I gonna do with those goods? How about trading them, that is converting them in victory points? If I play the trader, first, if more than 1 trader was played in a single turn, for each trader after the first, we move that marker, the exchange rate marker, back by 2 spaces. Then that indicates the exchange rate for the turn, which is the one that every player that has played the trader can use. Again, I can just use the goods that I have here on my board. I reduce those goods and I exchange them for victory points, which I record on this other board. As simple as that. After the trader has been used, the yellow wooden marker goes down to 0. I guess the idea is that you have flooded the market with all of the goods that you have exchanged, and now the market is getting a little more interesting for a while before the demand comes back. Then we have the beggar, extremely important card because it allows you to get all of your cards back in your hand. Also, you get goods based on how many cards you have in your hand. That is, if this is the last card that I'm playing, I have 0 cards left, I get 4 goods, and if I have a lot of other cards, I guess fewer goods. Also, you get 2 goods if traders were played this turn. And then again, you get your cards back. So these are the effects. Again, pretty much you have 2 types of currency and a similar type of logic for each type of currency, which is you need to read what the opponents are trying to do to determine if it's good to get a good, decent price now, or if you can risk and get a lower price unless somebody else steals it from you, when it is time to exploit the fact that people may be jumping on the same resource and you're not jumping for that resource, you're using, however, the cards that they are used to fuel your own cards. So these 2 sets have the same logic. The trader has its own interesting logic, of course, because it's all about when we can do that. If everybody's trading in the same turn, then the marker, the rate of exchange may go down quite a bit, which is super annoying. And again, figuring out when to do it, for example, but if I think that my opponent is going to trade a lot of points next turn, I may go with the trader, even if it doesn't generate me many points, just because that is going to reset the marker, and now my opponent that maybe have a ton of points will have to wait before those are really valuable again, before those goods are really valuable again, or will have to trade at a non-so-exciting rate of exchange. The beggar, very interesting card. I mean, sometimes you may be tempted to create a little set And then, I just play 2 cards, very awesome. I'll play the beggar, I get them back, but then you're not getting many resources. You're spending a whole turn or half of your turn if you're playing with 2 cards, just taking cards back. So that is expensive. So playing the beggar too early is a problem. However, if you delay too long, you find yourself in a problematic position, which is you telegraph to the opponents what you have in your hand. If my opponent has been paying attention and knows that at the end I'm left with these 2 cards, well, then the opponent knows that now is probably the right time to play this one and getting stuff for playing the customs when frigates have been played, especially if you're playing with 2 or 3 players. So then we play 2 cards at a time. And the opponent has seen that I have 2 cards in my hand. One is to be the beggar. If the opponent knows what I have, then they're able to exploit. If it's a frigate or a galleon, they can play a customs against me. If it is a captain or an admiral, they can play a governor. It's not exactly against me, but they're getting stuff based on what I play. So still a disadvantage for me. So what do we have here? We have on one hand what appears to be a very dry, extremely dry euro. I mean, it seems like it's so much about crunching numbers and simply optimizing your actions, etc., etc. On the other hand, the human factor is intense, and it really is actually what shines through these cold, heartless numerical mechanics, because it is just not about creating your own little engine, which is not exactly the point. You don't really have your own little engine like a deck building game. You have, if you're playing well, you understand what the opponent is doing a little bit better than the opponent is understanding what you're trying to do. There are some cards that will appear objectively better, but again, if everybody plays the same card at the same time, then having to split the loot makes those cards not so interesting. But then again, if everybody thinks, well, my friends are gonna use the admiral and the captain, let's play the governor, and everybody plays the governor, then that is silly too. So it really is, to me, a game which is about the human factor, about reading the opponents. And although it's like simultaneous selection of action, it doesn't feel like rock, paper, scissors, because it has an extra level of complexity, more options, more wrinkles to them, and it goes together with, again, with challenges related to hand management. Rock, paper, scissors, I can always play whatever thing I have. Here I also have to take into account what the opponent has already played, what I have left, what my opponent knows about what I still have in my hand. So to me, this game turned out to be surprisingly pleasant. Again, very simple, very basic, but for a filler or for an extended filler, this is a game that to me hits a soft spot because it is simple as a filler. It is easy to teach, easy to play. Again, it's sort of like play as you go, because these effects make really sense as soon as you start playing them. You feel a little absurd the way you explain them, but it's not hard to get into the game at all. It plays fast, and yet there is enough thinking here. There is enough meat to really keep me interested. It gives me that Puerto Rico, the board game, kind of feel. It kind of scratches that itch when, of course, I don't feel like playing the whole game of Puerto Rico. It's a little bit of a brain burner for me. This one doesn't burn my brain. I don't know, warms it up pleasantly, is a brain warmer. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, but what I'm trying to convey is the fact that this little game is a really pleasant game. It's a nice little game that has more than meets the eye, definitely more than meets the eye, that is not as dry as cold as it looks like, but it's a game that creates very nice, very fun interactions. It has a puzzle element that has to do with the cards, a puzzle element that has to do with your opponents, and all of these puzzly elements come together in a game that, again, it felt surprisingly non-abstract, not as abstract as I imagined. Definitely a pleasant experience. Santo Domingo, I'm glad I picked up this copy. Didn't know much about it. I kind of like took my chances, and I'm glad that I did, because I really had a good time playing Santo Domingo.